Hey guys and girls, Bored Now back with you. On this video I will be talking about episode 5 of the 4th season of The Handmaid's Tale. The episode is called Chicago, and I will be going into full spoilers from the start of this review, just to warn you. So we've reached the halfway point of season 4, and this episode really feels like that. It is setting up a lot of different things with different characters for the remainder of the season and possibly moving forward, because there's at least one more season after this. And having been really positive on last week's episode, I'm much more mixed on this one. There are a couple of frustrating moments. Then again, there is a lot of stuff I like, but there's a lot of question marks as well with things that are set up in this episode, and until I see how they play out exactly, I can't really judge, so it definitely feels like a mid-season episode. There's a couple of frustrating moments, there's stuff I like, but ultimately, until I see how some of this stuff pans out, I can't really judge. Definitely feels like a mid-season episode. So I'll get into it, because obviously the big drama and the focus in this episode is on June and Janine. And after last week's episode, where Janine agreed to sleep with Stephen, the leader of this rebel group, to get her and June some food, this sort of carries on from that, and it actually does a really interesting character sort of thing with Janine, because at the start of this episode we can see that she's actually started to get attached to Stephen, and it's almost like she views him as like a boyfriend, like there's a relationship which has escalated quite fast, and definitely not sure if he sees it the same way, but they're sort of sleeping with each other regularly, like they're hanging around each other a lot. He's teaching her how to shoot, target practice, all that sort of thing. And we kind of see some of this from June's perspective, with her sort of looking on. Again, she's being very protective of Janine and sort of warns her not to get too attached to Stephen. We're not going to be staying here long. You can't trust him, all the rest of it. And again, we see the real contrast between the two characters. But I think what I really like about this stuff is, even though I think we're meant to sort of agree with June on this one, and certainly Stephen, a very sort of murky character, he came off as very kind of cold and unlikable in the previous episode. And he does have an awful line in this one. I can't remember exactly. I think it's when he refers to them as like pieces of meat. It's very sort of harsh line, but in any case, I think what I like about this is, even if you do read it as that, and that June's right to be cynical, is at the very least, it is Janine making her own decisions, which is something she puts to June when they have a falling out over it, like in the middle of the episode. So I think there is this argument to be made, because if you're sort of getting into having freedom and this whole idea of women having a choice in this world and fighting their way to have choice, then there's an argument then, as long as Janine is happy with Stephen and it's her choice to do this, then that's sort of all that matters, and she does still have that freedom. It's her choice, just like it's June's choice not really to trust him, not really to engage with anyone at this camp, any of the other soldiers, because there's a scene where she's like sort of offered help, because they go to this centre to get like supplies and what have you, and there's a soldier there who sort of offers her help, and she cynically reads it as, he just wants to sleep with me, that's that sort of thing, and it's never confirmed one way or the other, but Yeah, I do find that idea quite interesting. And although from June's point of view, Janine's being suckered in, and Stephen doesn't really care about her, and I think in a way we're meant to think that too, but to a certain extent it is Janine's choice. She should be allowed to make that choice. And so things kind of build to this point where Janine's getting very close to Stephen, and she's actually starting to consider staying with him. And again, she works some strings really, because when they're about to move on to like this new location, on to Chicago, and this is June's focus. She's got real sort of tunnel vision, and I think this is the scene where he makes like the meat remark, but June sort of demands it, then goes with him, and it's actually Janine who talks him into letting them go with him, saying, yeah, you should take her with you. She's been a real leader. She's a real soldier. She's an asset. So they sort of go with them, and you get this scene where they sort of hide out in this diner, because a group of like soldiers sort of show up and are searching the area, and June's really mad afterwards, because she's like, yeah, come on, there was only a few of them, we could have taken them out. And Stephen kind of rationales then, yeah, but if we take them out, soon there will be more soldiers and there will be attention to this area, and we really don't want that. And it's just a really strong sort of character stuff for June in a way, than she is so focused. At times she does come off as unlikable in this episode, but it's still good character focus, and it's kind of in tune with where she is as a character at the moment. But ultimately you get this big decision from Janine, and this is where the episode frustrates me a bit, because they do pull this sort of like bluff on you, because Janine says that she wants to stay, and again, her own decision, all this, and it's actually a really interesting choice that you wouldn't have seen coming. So obviously June has to let her make her own decision, and they have this emotional goodbye. It's a really moving sort of scene, and yeah, there's some touching stuff in there, some touching like personal comments between the two. Yeah, there's stuff, they call each other beautiful. Janine sort of says you're never gonna forget, a girl with an eye patch, all this sort of stuff. It lands really well for me as a goodbye type scene, and I got a bit annoyed because then in the next instant, because June obviously leaves and goes alone, and she's looking under, you've got like this deserted post-apocalyptic street, and she's searching under the car, and Janine suddenly pops out of nowhere, and it's like, oh, okay, she's coming with her now. But then in the next instance, we get this obviously plot where the government of Gilead are now bombing this street, because I'll talk about this in a minute, but there's this politics of this sort of ceasefire which had been negotiated, but that they sort of pull a fast one where before the ceasefire officially goes through, they decide to drop some bombs as like a message to the rebels. And obviously June and Janine are in this location at the time, and it sort of leaves it open at the very end whether Janine is dead or not, because June is looking around for her in the rubble, can't find her. I think there might have been a shot of the hat, I'm not too sure actually, I didn't quite see, but in any case she can't find her. And then it kind of ends with Moira showing up. She's obviously, they've been coming over to like save people from Canada and to give supplies and stuff. So this big moment where June and Moira see each other for the first time in quite some time, and it's quite the way to end the episode, and it sets up lots of interesting things. So I'm sort of assuming that we're meant to think that Janine is dead, and I think the goodbye scene was her big send off, but it's then they sort of did the double bluff in a way. Even though this works as a send off scene, or the goodbye does. But the other thing about it is, from a character point of view, from a storyline point of view, I think it would have been more interesting if Janine had stayed with Steve and had stayed with this rebel group. Either could have checked in on them from time to time, or you could have just left it as that. You could have left it open and, hey, this is Janine's new life. From that point of view, that's quite an interesting idea. Leave the audience on as her and June go their separate ways, and the door then is still open to bring her back from time to time. I was sort of a bit gutted if this is the end for them anyway, just because I really like them together, and I've liked them together this season. But I understand the need to freshen it up, and certainly June now potentially going to Canada, now seeing Moya, now seeing Luke and the baby and all this stuff. I think that does actually raise some fresh possibilities and to shake things up a bit. But yeah, I do have mixed feelings if this is the end for Janine. I guess it's quite a fitting end. I think it just bugged me a little with the little fake out, and then she stayed alive essentially, and she stayed with Stephen at the camp. I think that was a more interesting way to go, and who knows with this show, it's possible at some point we might find out she's alive anyway, but it does feel like maybe this is her send off. So sort of mixed feelings on that. Some like more politics of Gilead and some of the characters remaining. So here is essentially told to retire, then it's time for her to step down. So she's not going to take that on the chin. She immediately starts looking for ways to work her way back in, and she forms like this unlikely alliance with Lawrence, because Lawrence is put in this position where he is trying to fend for June essentially without letting on to the council, and it's actually his idea for the ceasefire with the rebels. So, and they said they'll take it under advisement, although at the time they do sort of vote against it. But Lawrence is saying it could be a good thing for the time being, just to give everyone a bit of a breather, and obviously if they deliver them some aid at the same time, then that could go a long way into like sort of settling things down. But in any case, when Lydia is like told to retire, she goes to Lawrence and points out that she knows about some of his like dealings, about some of his like inner workings, and that she can like expose his deals and can, potentially like get him into a lot of trouble. So she tries to blackmail him into like getting her back and reinstated, and at first he actually stands firm, which is a really great moment for him, because he says to her, yeah, is there anything else you've got? And it's almost like he's taking his chances, but he says to her, is there anything you've got on my fellow council members? Because, yeah, then we could really use that. And they sort of compromise and form this unholy alliance, because to let Lydia take June, like if she's captured, sort of thing. So there's this sort of compromise where, yeah, they sort of form this alliance, as I said, and at this sort of turn where Lawrence is suddenly painted as like a heel, because when they make this decision that they will do the ceasefire, but then they're gonna bomb people, they're gonna, set off these bombs before the ceasefire, then Lawrence seems to know about this ahead of time. This sort of cold sort of look to him where it says, well, this is just one of the consequences about doing war. And Nick's very concerned because of, if June gets caught up in all this stuff is kind of interesting. One thing I'll say is that I may be a bit concerned that certain characters are going to outlive their welcome. Not Lawrence, because he's still quite a new character relatively to the show. But maybe Aunt Lydia. And the stuff with her in this episode was pretty solid stuff. But it's just that unless they do something radical with her all 4 seasons, so, if it's just going to be the old ruthless, nasty Aunt Lydia, is that really anything that new? And I think Nick feels like someone who has definitely outstayed his welcome. I mean, he's obviously motivated by his love for June, and something which I feel now has passed its sell-by date. And someone like Nick definitely feels like expendable at this point. But a lot of this is up in the air depending on what they do. So that's The Handmaid's Tale for this week, the episode Chicago. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, like and subscribe, and also share me out on social media. I'll be back next week with episode 6 of season 4. Thanks for listening. Goodbye.